Hello and welcome. This is India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. The next 1 hour, we'll give you a lowdown of all that's happening around the world through the lens of New Delhi. But first up, the headlines. Prime Minister Modi arrives in Brazil for G20 summit as New Delhi gears up to voice the concerns of the global south. Prime Minister Modi will be in Brazil today and tomorrow. Another Khalistani provocation against New Delhi, so-called referendum held in New Zealand's Auckland over the weekend. Bangladesh's interim government chief advisor Mohammad Yunus addresses media on completion of 100 days of his government, fails to provide date for conducting fresh elections, yet again makes a pitch for extradition of Sheikh Hasina. Major escalation in the Ukraine conflict. US President Joe Biden green lights limited use of US long-range ATACMS missiles deep inside the Russian territory. And tensions continue to simmer in West Asia. Over the weekend, Israeli strikes continued in Beirut and killed the Hezbollah media chief. All right, a big story that we are tracking on India Global today is the fresh provocation that has come in against New Delhi. This time it is taking place in New Zealand. Banned Khalistani secessionist outfit Sikhs for Justice has conducted another so-called referendum, quote-unquote. And in fact, this has taken place in Auckland's Otia Square over the weekend. The event drew sharp and very strong criticism from the Indian community. Remember, there's a very large, vibrant Indian community there, and they came out strongly in opposition of this. And multiple Sikh organizations also distanced themselves from the referendum that took place. However, one day after the so-called referendum, New Zealand's government has said that it respects and recognizes India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. In fact, soon after the so-called quote-unquote referendum and the announcement that came in, Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar flagged the issue to his New Zealand counterpart, Winston Peters. The duo met on the sidelines of a conference in Australia's Canberra just a couple of days back on the 6th of November. But let's tell our viewers that this isn't the first time that the pro-Khalistani outfit is trying to provoke New Delhi. It has held several referendums, whether it's in Canada, UK, Australia. So you have several countries giving safe harbor to these separatist outfits. And as a result, it was banned by New Delhi in 2018, over 6.5 years ago. This group was formed in 2007 by Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Pannun and has been operating out of the US since its inception. But what does this mean for New Delhi? What is it that it should be doing to address this major issue is our key focus. When we speak to a prominent Sikh voice, in fact, to talk more about this, Mr. Sukhi joins me to decode what could possibly be the key areas that can be of interest. Mr. Sukhi, your first response to the kind of activities one is seeing that are taking place around the world, not just in the US and Canada, but also in other geographies.
Basically, it is a typical Dukandari of Pannun and their associates, right? What they are doing, this kind of activity, the criminal activity, the violent activity over there on the US soil and also on the Canadian side, it is very, very concerning. It's very concerning, especially for the Sikh community, and because their violent activity can hurt the Sikh community in the long run.
All right, let's first get in the location from where Mr. Sukhi is joining so that our viewers can know that we are talking to Mr. Sukhi, who's been a very prominent voice as far as raising concerns over what's happening with regard to these Khalistani outfits that are mushrooming and being given a safe harbor in geography after geography. But it's a hollow movement, isn't it, Mr. Sukhi, finding absolutely no resonance with the Sikh community, which are very large and vibrant around the world?
Oh, no. This is because there is always an agenda behind these kind of movements, right? They are supported by a third party. It could be ISI, it could be China, it could be anybody from the Western countries. But there looks like it's going to die down soon. It's going to die down itself. And because they are not getting any support from the Sikh community, mainstream Sikh community. Up to now, the mainstream Sikh community was silent, but now, given their activity, at least the way they are attacking the Hindu temple, and also they're going after the Hindu community, which is unacceptable to any Sikh community. So that's why I think there is a huge resentment, given their activity, disruption activity among the largest Nagar Kirtan and also some of the Gurdwara. So the Sikh community is not happy with them, and so I think their days are numbered. It's going to die down soon. And also, given the change in the government, especially the Trump administration is going to be very tough on any kind of radicalization. So looks like I'm very optimistic actually. So the Dukandari and Mr. Pannun Dukandari and their Gundagardi, the days are numbered actually.
Okay, Mr. Sukhi, as far as the Canadian government is concerned, it's been giving shelter to Khalistani extremism, and in fact, it's been seen and noticed by all quarters around the world. How do you think this could have acted differently, played out differently? What is it that Justin Trudeau's government should have done to keep this under check?
It seems like a joke. On the Canadian side, the government, Justin Trudeau's government, looks like a joke. Not only they have not copied with the government of India, right? And even at local level, so the kind of the issue they are facing over there. Forget about the economic issues, and their local, that's like the car stealing, organized crimes, and the drug dealing, and the very soft on the crime. That's a matter of concern locally over there. So that's why nobody cares about the local, especially the law enforcement authority. So that's the reason actually the people, they don't really care, especially the people from the Punjab, because we know actually, so if we can find a way around and we can get away, then we'll definitely do that kind of blunder again and again. And so they are very soft on the Khalistani activity, and it looks like it could be because of the political reason. And because of it's a big vote bank, and also they get the funding, and so that's why some of the Khalistani activists, so they have infiltrated among the political party, and which is going to be bad for the all Canadian in the long run, and even the local Canadian population, the communities are very upset given the criminal activity we have seen, and the attack on the temple, and also there are other activity, the violent activity. So that's why it's because of the end of the day, Justin Trudeau's government is responsible for that. And so people are thinking even on the American side, Mr. Trump and also Elon Musk, and so they have already spoken publicly that they would love to see Justin Trudeau go away. And so if the new government comes in, and I hope at least so they will be tough on this kind of radicalization, and also this kind of the activity, whatever the Mr. Pannun's, the Gunda Dal is doing over there. And so that's why, so that's a kind of we are very hopeful that so the issue will be resolved on the Canadian side too. But on the American side, I'm very, very optimistic. At least this is going to be game over very soon.
And what is it that New Delhi should do, given that these instances are increasing?
Given the track record of the Khalistani, and so I think the government of India doesn't have to do anything, and they will be pretty much exposed by the local Sikh society on the US side. So that's why I think the government of India doesn't have to do anything. I think it will be taken care by themselves, the people, those who are the American citizens of the Indian origin.
And do you think Donald Trump, when he walks into Oval Office, will treat this issue with the kind of urgency that India wants?
Trump, I think, this is my personal opinion, I think because Trump is going to put them in their place, especially the Khalistani activists. And so up to now, they had a soft corner. Whatever happened in the latest, in the Pannun's plot, because of that, they got the sympathy, right? And also, they were able to build the narrative. Actually, so the Khalistani, they were able to build the narrative that this, or the whole Sikh community want the Khalistan, right? So they are the representative of the Sikh community. So now what we are trying to do, actually, so all the moderate Sikh community, we are reaching out to our local congressman and the senator and any elected representative, letting them know that these are not our representatives. And especially the Khalistani and the Pannun group, they have nothing to do with the Sikh community, and they are very violent people. When we gonna send this kind of information to the Trump administration, and I think they will listen to this kind of our request, and they will take care of this kind of activities.
All right, Sukhi Chahal, a prominent voice from the Sikh community, speaking to me from Chandigarh. Appreciate you taking out the time, Mr. Chahal. All right, shifting focus now to the latest as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Well, it's only 3 days short of completing the very tragic 1,000-day mark. Wars take a toll, and they take a toll on people and families. Well, the latest update is outgoing American President Joe Biden has for the very first time given a green light to Kyiv to be able to use long-range American missiles that can actually go deep within the Russian territory. Of course, it is meant for quote-unquote limited strikes, but it can go hundreds of kilometers inside the Russian territory. And it could really change the game as far as how is this war now going to be perceived by Moscow. Will President Putin now see this as a major escalation from the point of view of Ukraine? Remains to be seen. But the development comes despite Moscow repeatedly cautioning Washington that any use of such missiles on its territory will be considered as a major escalation. And the debate on whether or not long-range missiles should be used to strike targets within the Russian territory has been going on for a while now. In fact, ever since this war started, which, as I said, tragically is going to be 1,000 days in just a few days. Initial reports mentioned that Biden is working out such a move. In fact, it headlined way back in September. Putin himself warned that the move would very well be an act of war, and that could mean major strikes, retaliatory strikes that could come in from Russia as well. Biden's approval comes on the back of one of the biggest Russian assaults that took place in Ukraine in the past few months. Over 20 people have been killed so far. Millions of Ukrainians woke up to sounds of Russian missiles and drones striking capital Kyiv and multiple other cities. In fact, in a post shared on social media platform X, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed that Russia unleashed 210 missiles and drones, including aero-ballistic and hypersonic missiles, as well as dozens of Shahid drones that Russia probably got from Iran. Target, of course, were the critical infrastructure, power installations, all that Russia says is linked to Ukraine's military infrastructure, but nevertheless, they were all critical infra assets that were picked up and targeted by Russia. The Ukrainian president went on to allege that Russian strikes also resulted in deaths of civilians. Not only this, Zelensky also raised alarm over Moscow, including North Korea, in its war before urging G20 leaders to take a strong stance against Russian aggression. In fact, North Korean state media has said that Pyongyang may dispatch as many as 100,000 troops, or maybe 10,000 troops at least. They've already done so far to aid Russia's war against Ukraine. Meanwhile, as the war grinds on, my colleague Umar Shankar Singh is there. He's joining us live from Kyiv to give us a sense of which way things are moving right now, and more importantly, what's the situation really like on ground. Let's play out this ground report that Umar Shankar Singh filed a short while back.
I am in Ukrainian capital Kyiv, and behind me are those Russian tanks and armored vehicles which were destroyed by Ukrainian army during invasion of Kyiv in February-March 2022. The Russia-Ukraine war has dragged now on for 1,000 days, and in the meantime, US President Joe Biden has given Ukraine permission to use long-range missile against Russia. This means that now Ukraine will be able to attack the interior areas of Russia through the Army tactical missile system provided by the US. Ukrainian President Zelensky had been demanding this for a long time, but US was not giving the permission. There was a fear that doing so could further intensify the war. Therefore, for the first 2 years of the war, the US did not give a permission to Ukraine to use the Army tactical missile system against Russia. In February this year, President Joe Biden decided secretly to give a missile system to Ukraine, and Ukraine received a consignment of these missiles in April. When Zelensky met Joe Biden in Washington last September, he presented the victory plan which he had already presented before the Ukrainian parliament. Information came out through sources that Zelensky presented a list of Russian targets which Ukraine wants to hit with the long-range missiles. And now that permission has been granted, Zelensky has said that a lot of being said in the media, but an attack is not made with the words. These things are not announced. The missiles will speak for themselves. So clear-cut message to Russia. The range of these missiles has been reported to be up to 100 kilometers or 62 miles. However, Ukraine does not have a large stockpile of such missiles. So some experts believe that Ukraine will not get benefited much militarily from this. Then there is also the matter of whether the newly elected President Trump continues this decision or stops it once he comes into the power. But at present, the situation is that Ukraine will now want to give a befitting reply to the way Russia has increased the attack on Ukraine in recent days. At least 7 people were killed, dozens were injured in Russia's drone and missile attacks on Saturday and Sunday. And Ukraine's energy sectors have suffered very heavy damage, and challenges have increased in this cold. Experts say that the Ukraine also wants to take revenge by targeting Russia's energy bases. Also, Russia has deployed about 50,000 soldiers in Kursk so that the Ukrainian army can be driven away from there. Several thousand soldiers in this area are from North Korea. America has also not liked it. So Ukraine has been allowed to use long-range missiles. Ukraine's occupation of the Kursk region is important because it can be used for a bargain in a possible peace agreement. Before leaving here, Ukraine will want to remove Russia's occupation of its area, which Russia has annexed. The attitude of the newly elected President of America, Donald Trump, on Biden's this decision is also important, who has talked about stopping the Ukraine-Russia war within 24 hours' time. Russia will become more aggressive due to this decision of Biden. This is sure to give a setback to the Trump's efforts to establish peace. Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., has tweeted that the military-industrial complex is working to ensure World War III before his father has a chance to establish peace.
All right, shifting focus back to South Asia, India's neighborhood. Let's now do a deep dive of what's happening in Bangladesh. The interim government has completed 100 days in office. The chief advisor of this interim government, Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, presented his 100-day report card in a televised address, and he spoke about several aspects. First, he downplayed the reports with regard to attacks on minorities, specifically, of course, the Hindu minorities. He said those were exaggerated. And in fact, I'm going to play out some of those bites so that we can keep telling our viewers what were the important pieces that Muhammad Yunus's address to his countrymen was, and then we come back and talk more. Let's play out that first soundbite where he spoke about the minorities.
প্রতিটি হত্যার বিচার আমরা করবই। জুলাই আগস্ট হত্যাকাণ্ডের বিচারের যে উদ্যোগ আমরা নিয়েছি তার কাজও বেশ ভালোভাবে এগিয়ে যাচ্ছে। পতিত স্বৈরাচার শেখ হাসিনাকেও আমরা ভারতের কাছ থেকে ফেরত চাইব।
All right, Mohammed Yunus doubled down on the extradition of his, well, some would say enemy number one, but essentially the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who's been in India since 5th of August when she left office in a hurry. Mohammed Yunus also said that not only the deaths in the uprising, but also other violation of human rights, including alleged enforced disappearances that took place under Sheikh Hasina's tenure, would be investigated. Okay, let's play out those sound bites. We come back and talk more.
কেবল দেশে নয়, গুম, খুন ও জুলাই আগস্ট গণহত্যার সাথে জড়িতদের আমরা আন্তর্জাতিক আদালতেও বিচারের উদ্যোগ নিয়েছি। ইন্টারন্যাশনাল ক্রিমিনাল কোর্টের প্রধান কৌশলী করিম খানের সঙ্গে আমার এই ব্যাপারে ইতিমধ্যে কথা হয়েছে।
Okay, but that's just half of the story. He has also sought help from the global police organization, which is Interpol, in issuing a red corner notice for the arrest of Sheikh Hasina and her associates, which he, as you heard, it was a bite in Bangla where he very clearly said that he holds the former Prime Minister responsible for all that has happened, and he's seeking a red corner notice because of that. Now, Sheikh Hasina and her close associates are facing numerous criminal charges at home, and the UNIS-led government is also pushing for the ICC to take up that particular case. Listen in.
চাইব আমরা যেন এমন একটি নির্বাচন ব্যবস্থা সৃষ্টি করতে পারি যা যুগ যুগ ধরে অনুসরণ করা যাবে। এর ফলে সাংবৎসরিক রাজনৈতিক সংকট থেকে আমাদের দেশ রক্ষা পাবে। এই জন্য প্রয়োজনীয় সময়টুকু আমি আপনাদের কাছ থেকে চেয়ে নিচ্ছি। নির্বাচনী সংস্কারের সিদ্ধান্ত হয়ে গেলে খুব দ্রুত আপনারা নির্বাচনের রোডম্যাপও পেয়ে যাবেন।
But the most important point, when is Dhaka going to have elections? On that, Mohammed Yunus was not willing to give a time frame. In fact, he said that his task is to hold a new election to give power to the new government as and when it happens. No time frame, no roadmap. All he said was his administration will first put in a reform agenda in place, and only then electoral system will be in place, and then an election will happen. So how long will be Bangladesh's march back to democracy is anybody's question, but one can imagine that this may take more than just a few weeks or few months, and it could take much longer for Bangladesh to return to democracy. We're slipping into a very short break. We come back and talk more on the other big stories that India Global is keeping a close watch on. Stay with us. Hello and welcome. This is India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. A quick look at some of the big stories, and then we come back and talk more about India's G20 pitch. First up, the number of students from India in US surpasses that from China for the first time in 15 years. 21 cabinet ministers sworn in before Sri Lankan President Anurakkumara Dissanayake on Monday morning at Colombo's presidential secretariat. And US President-elect Donald Trump picks vocal defender of fossil fuels Chris Wright as Energy Secretary, while Brendan Carr, a fierce critic of tech giants, set to lead US Federal Communications Commission, or FCC. All right, our big focus right now on India Global. Prime Minister Modi in Brazil right now, in the South American country, after wrapping up a very productive visit to Nigeria. Remember, he's on a 3-nation tour starting on the 16th of November till the 21st of November. He has held bilateral talks in Nigeria with President Ahmed and interacted with the Indian community there. Alongside Prime Minister Modi now, he is Chinese President Xi Jinping as well as US President Joe Biden, who will be attending the big G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro today and tomorrow, that is 18th and 19th of November. And the third and the final leg of his trip will be in Guyana, where Prime Minister Modi will be on the 19th till the 21st at the invitation of President Mohammad Irfan Ali. It will be the first ever visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Guyana in more than 50 years. Remember, Prime Minister Modi has been really trying to bridge the gap that has happened between India and CARICOM nations. There's a very clear attempt to try and reach out to Caribbean countries. There's also a second summit of the India CARICOM nations that will take place in Guyana, and this follows a recent visit of the Jamaican Prime Minister to India as well. But right now, the focus is the G20 summit, where Prime Minister Modi will be. There are also a couple of pull-asides that could happen. There's no clear communication that has come in as to whether or not or how many will be the bilaterals that Prime Minister Modi may have at the G20 in Rio de Janeiro. But the focus will be taking on from what was the declaration last year. And before we get in, Celia Mendoza, reporter joining us from Rio de Janeiro, let me just tell our viewers that this year, the G20 summit in 2024 in Brazil, two key aspects are the focus. One is the energy transition for developing countries, and second, the focus on hunger and poverty, the index that is likely to be launched, which is going to be a key focus and a hallmark of this summit under Brazil's presidency. All eyes will be on the global south, which is pretty much at the center of all global discussions. Let's get in Celia now to give us a sense of how things are looking on ground and also a sense of what all is lined up on day one of the G20 summit.
That's right. We're here at the Modern Museum of Art in Rio de Janeiro. 26,000 members of police as well as the military are protecting the leaders as they are arriving here to the summit. Members of the media have been following closely the agenda. Today, the big meeting will be the alliance, of global alliance against hunger and poverty. And we're waiting to have details of one and each of the members of the G20 about their proposals and how they're going to contribute on that effort. Each one of the leaders will have the possibility to give a speech.
Okay, Celia, while you give a lowdown of what's expected, let me just tell our viewers watching this right now that Prime Minister Modi, those are live visuals coming in of Prime Minister Modi now reaching the summit venue where the G20 summit will start shortly. Those are live visuals that are coming in where there is going to be, remember, 19 countries plus European Union and African Union. Together, they are set to shape 85% of humanity. Go ahead, Celia. We'll keep playing those visuals, but go ahead, Celia, make the point that you were making.
Yes, that's right. So basically, we're waiting for their finishing the arrivals, and so far, we're getting close to it. Prime Minister Modi arriving, as you mentioned, and this area, which is a museum of art, the media are basically in the other side of this area, and the leaders will come up. We are now expecting, after Prime Minister Modi, that China President Xi Jinping, as well as the leader of the United States, Joe Biden, arrived. They have not arrived yet, and that will pretty much cover all the leaders who will be present during the session of the alliance against the poverty and hunger. As you can see in the images, the president of Brazil is embracing the leader of India. Last year, it was given the presidency from India to Brazil, and Prime Minister Modi has highlighted the fact that because of India, they were able to give a focus on the global south to work on the issues that are more present for that region and the world. Modi, of course, has been supporting, and it was part of what he wanted to do last year in India. It was to provide the tools to help Brazil to carry out this presidency during the past year. That comes to this, which will be a declaration tomorrow. But today will be this big debate in which the leaders will have the possibility to present their proposals. One of the big proposals presented by President Lula has to do with imposing a 2% tax on the riches of the world, about 3,000 people that they will identify. And according to him, that will be able to provide them with the opportunity to help while around 500 million people in the world. However, this proposal has not been supported publicly by countries like the United States.
Indeed,
We know the president.
You know, going into this summit, the sense one gets is that there are two clear themes for Brazil. And the summit highlight is essentially the fact around energy transition for developing countries, especially because the climate talks have pretty much been completely gridlocked in Baku. And second, the fact that the poverty index that Brazil is really putting its heart and soul in. Isn't that what the sum and substance of this summit could be this time around?
Definitely it is, and you have two events that mark that. The first one is the President of the United States, for the first time, a sitting president visiting the Amazon and providing a proposal about that. Secretary General was here talking about climate change and how important it is. And of course, leaders like Modi, Xi Jinping, and Biden are crucial as biggest countries that are emitting the gases that are, according to science, affecting that issue in particular. They are talking about green energies and how they will be able to do that transition. And that is something that they want to put in the document. But the other part, as you mentioned, the poverty and hunger, it is a key event, but also the proposals will be fundamental to be able to move forward in the declaration. But it is being pushed back by countries like Argentina on the possibility of imposing 2% taxes on the richest, and that could create an issue on a final declaration. Of course, Brazil wants to make sure that everybody's in agreement, but
Yes.
it is some discussions on that end.
Absolutely. Getting a declaration itself is a big political, diplomatic feat. And this summit is taking place at a time when both the wars have really intensified. Whether you take the Russia-Ukraine war or the one in the Middle East, they've both intensified, haven't they? So it's going to be a bit of a task to also get, some clarity on what is the global positioning going to be on these two wars, isn't it?
It is, and definitely today we heard from the White House on that subject, especially after President Biden authorized the use of weapons inside Ukraine given by the United States. And this has, of course, inside Russia, and that has created questions about how the group is going to handle it. Knowing that Russia is part of this group, the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, will be here. And we know that the U.S. is pushing.
All right. Okay. So before I get in Celia back, let me just tell our viewers that these are visuals that came in just a few minutes back when Prime Minister Modi has reached the venue of the G20 summit that is taking place in Brazil at Rio de Janeiro. The backdrop of that summit is essentially how is now the voice of the global south, which is so integral to global discussions now, going to be taken forward in 2-3 key areas. Climate being one, poverty, inequality being the second aspect, which Brazil has focused on a lot in this year's summit, and the third being the global wars that have actually intensified, whether it is in the Russia-Ukraine war or whether it is the one in the Middle East. In fact, as we keep a close watch on the latest that's coming in at the G20 summit, let's quickly tell our viewers that, remember, this is the second leg of Prime Minister Modi's visit. He was in Nigeria before this. And take a look at this report that tells you just what all was accomplished in that historic visit in Nigeria by the Prime Minister.
India is steadily emerging as the voice of the global south. And as it does, its foreign policy is taking a new shape each year. To add to India's ever-growing presence on the international stage, PM Narendra Modi visited Nigeria over the weekend, making a one-day stop in the most populous African nation.
बीते सालों में अफ्रीका की आवाज को ग्लोबल प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर उठाने के लिए भारत ने हर संभव प्रयास किया।
This visit to Nigeria was part of PM Modi's three-nation tour and is the first by an Indian Prime Minister to the African nation in 17 years. The visit has given a fillip to what was supposedly a lukewarm engagement with Africa, the most resource-abundant continent on Earth. Prime Minister Modi's relationship with Africa is not new. As Gujarat's Chief Minister, he visited Uganda in 2009 to invite investors to the vibrant Gujarat Global Investors Summit. Fast forward to 2011, he hosted Rwanda's Prime Minister, Bernard Makuza, during the summit. Treating Africa as one of India's most potential investment avenues, the Modi government has invested over $12.37 billion in 206 infrastructure projects across 43 African countries, according to data released by the centre. Under the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Programme, almost 40,000 Africans have been trained in India in the last 10 years. And in the last 5 years, more than 15,000 youth from 22 African countries have been provided scholarships by India. To take this relationship forward, India and Nigeria pledged to enhance cooperation in defence, trade and development, signing 3 agreements during Prime Minister Modi's historic visit. In recognition of PM Modi's efforts, the Nigerian government honoured him with the nation's second highest award, the Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger. With a new chapter opening in India's foreign policy, the Global South has its eyes set on India. Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, shifting focus now to a very important data point that I want to spend some time on, which is that now more Indian students are going to the US for higher studies as against China. And this is a change that has happened, a trend change after 15 long years. International students essentially were coming from India and China, and in the last 15 years, more from China. But that trend has been bucked this year. India has emerged as the top source of international students in the US. Over 330,000 Indian students enrolled during the 2023-24 academic year. This is a 23% jump compared to the last year, as per the data coming in from Open Doors report on international educational exchange. The surge was primarily driven by graduate programs. It's a 19% jump that has taken place, totaling nearly 197,000 students. Indian participation in the optional practical training program has risen by 40%. Over 98,000 students are in fact benefiting from it. China has slipped now to second place, and there's been a 4% drop that has taken place in its student numbers, about 277,000. Now, despite this, China still leads in the undergrad and the non-degree program category. The US hosted, remember, a record-breaking 1.1 million international students last year. Contributes about $50 billion to its economy. It's a huge source of foreign exchange for it as far as Department of Commerce data is concerned. And the US continues to be a very important and a premier destination for global education. And India's growing presence is a very important shift in that trend. But what happens when there is Donald Trump coming into office? Remember, his entire election plank has been about anti-immigration. How will his office make the distinction between students coming in for degree and graduate programs and the rest of the immigration numbers? Remember, everything gets lost in election rhetoric, but hopefully policy decisions by an administration also manages to distinguish it from election rhetoric. And let's get in Sudhanshu Kaushik to tell us more about this. He's an executive director, North American Association of Indian Students, joining me from Chicago to talk more about this trend. First of all, Sudhanshu, it's early morning for you. Thank you so much for speaking to NDTV.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you can hear me.
My first question, that this trend that has changed in 15 years, what is the larger ramification of this? How do you read this on ground in universities?
Look, you're going to continue seeing this upwards trends. In the next 3 to 4 years, experts estimate the number of international Indian students in the United States is expected to hit of over 500,000. And that's both undergraduate and graduate. Like you correctly said, we've seen an increase in graduate students, but we have not been able to see an increase as much in undergraduate students, which is also expected to increase as tier 2, tier 3 international students within India are exposed to the curriculum, to the education, and also the opportunities that are available within the United States. Now, what I see is that when I'm in the United States, whether at first, last 5 years, you would see a lot of people.
Okay. All right. Sudhanshu, before I get back to you, I want to first also tell our viewers that some of this data point is reflective of the mood in the students community of the last 1 year. Remember, the education process and the admission cycle is about 12 months in making. So it takes that much time. So a lot of this is reflective of the mood 12 months or 18 months back. But Sudhanshu, let me ask you this. How do you see this trend at a time when the mood in America has changed? It's changed dramatically against immigration. Will they be able to make that distinction between international students and rest of the immigrants?
Look, I preface this by saying that NAIS in the previous Trump administration fought a case.
Okay. Okay, I think there's a bit of a technical snag at Sudhanshu's end. We'll try and fix this, but to tell our viewers, as I said, two important aspects of this trend needs further detailing and further look at. One, what happens to this trend going forward? As I said, this is reflective of a mood 12 months back. And point number two, Sudhanshu said that maybe in a couple of years, the Indian students could actually end up being 500,000. What does that mean? Does it mean that there could be special separate programs for and targeting Indian students? Sudhanshu, you were making a point about Donald Trump being in office.
I was saying is that, we a case against Donald Trump's previous administration and against their international student ban that was there in 2020, 2021. That being said, I think that we need to clarify the rhetoric against, legal immigration based off student or work versus the undocumented immigration that's been happening specifically in the past 4 years via India. The rhetoric or the policies that whether it's a Tom Homan or a Stephen Miller coming in place is against the undocumented, the illegal people from North India that are coming in on the basis of, the connections, et cetera, and crossing the border. The Trump administration has gone on record to say that we want skilled immigration. We want students from India. Literally, he said, India to come and study and hopefully be able to, take and involve themselves in and contribute to the economy. So I think there's a distinction between the rhetoric of undocumented illegal and documented student visas coming. And I don't think documented students have anything to fear about that.
You mentioned that this number is set to grow going forward. So do you think the policies are going to be more favorable under a Trump administration?
So I don't know if it's going to be favorable or not favorable under a Trump administration, but colleges are the ones who are making this happen. Look, in the past 5 years, they've let go of GRE GMATs. They have a lot of recruiting and resourcing happening in tier 2, tier 3 villages in India. So it's the colleges, the university administration.
All right, that is where it's really happening. Colleges are making it happen where Indian students can come in larger numbers. It could be the smaller towns, the tier 2, tier 3 cities where this trend could in fact increase going forward. And as we wrap things up in this edition of India Global, a quick check of what's happening at West Asia. Tensions between Israel and Iran-backed Hezbollah have increased, and the latest update is that Israeli strike on central Beirut has neutralized the militant group's media chief, that is Mohammad Afif. According to the Lebanese state broadcaster, Afif was killed after an Israeli strike hit the headquarters of the Baath political party. He was one of the few remaining public faces of the terror outfit. In fact, He was more visible after all-out war erupted between Israel and Hezbollah in September. And another Israeli strike hit a computer shop in central Beirut on Sunday, killing 2 people and wounding 13 others. And Israel also bombed several buildings in Beirut's southern suburbs, where Hezbollah has long been headquartered, after warning people to evacuate. And amidst this ever-intensifying Israeli onslaught, Lebanon has reportedly responded positively to a US-backed ceasefire proposal between Israel and the terror outfit Hezbollah. In fact, Washington's special envoy is due to arrive in Lebanon on Tuesday to discuss this. And speaking of mediation and ceasefire, there's movement in Qatar and Turkey as well, where senior Hamas members have actually now reportedly left Qatar for Turkey. The move comes after Doha said it was walking away from efforts to mediate and put an end to the Gaza war. Meanwhile, in Israel, the Netanyahu government has sent out the first 1,000 of 7,000 new Haredi enlistment orders, also due to be sent out by Sunday. The contentious move has sparked widespread protests by the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. But these are not the only protests to hit Israel. Thousands of Israelis rallied over the weekend in Tel Aviv, calling for a deal to release the hostages held in Gaza. Protesters held signs calling for a hostage deal, with one reading, "How much blood will be spilled?" Remains to be seen whether the hostages will come back home before another winter sets in. All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Global. Thanks so much for watching.